I have an extremely special guest today. A lot of the information that I've been getting lately, especially the deep dives on dinosaurs and nuclear bombs, have come straight from Crrow777 Radio, and I'm here with him today. And Crow is a special guy because he's the guy that will actually read all the old books, and I'm more of a guy who listens to the guys who reads all the old books. And he's the guy who got notoriety for filming the lunar wave in 2012. And just as coincidence and divine intervention possibly had it, he panned as he did it. So all the shills saying that it was an equipment malfunction could be disproven. He's had a very interesting life, Marine, roadie, philosopher, astronomer, just an incredible guy. So we're here with Crrow777. How are you, brother?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Let me kill my narcissism real quick here. I feel like we should open up with a joke. It's Owen Benjamin comedy, right? So maybe a baby seal walks into a club.
Oh, that's a good one. That's funny. Yeah, I was actually just re-listening to one of your older streams with Dave J from back in the day. Yeah, he's an interesting cat. And just the whole concept of Cain and Tubal Cain and the seed of Adam. And when you just described you live out in the farmland, in my mind today, I was just thinking about how Tubal Cain and Cain had metal and the cities. And then you have like the people in the farmland. And it's just such a different group of people,
Right. Dave J was controversial back in the day, and it was weird because he was one of the first people to get booted off for calling the fake events fake, mostly. But he was kind of like you, just a little more sharp-nosed. He wasn't backing off. He was a man who knew. And then I had him on years later, and I actually titled the clip, Dave J, who raged and saw through the veil and found peace. He was like a different human being. He'd calmed, but that dude can see some things. That was one of the early people I was watching, and everyone loved to hate Dave J. And I used to never understand, why people have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Never made sense to me.
Yeah, and one of the things he said I actually related to when he said that wasn't me. He's like, I'm happy-go-lucky. Like, for example, me, I was voted class carefree in high school. Like, that's why all of this YouTube world is so interesting to me, because he was saying I would say information that I knew was true, and then people would react, and then I would react against their reaction, and it would be this like different person. Not that it's a different person, but it's a different aspect to your personality, and how he felt like he was just in the pigsty just throwing haymakers, and now he has more peace. And he's smart, man. You guys had a great conversation.
It's you see, here's the problem. Like, there was a time when Dave J was raging. Crow, why won't you just say it the way it is? I mean, he was riding me like a cheap pony.
Right.
And I finally said one day, because I don't comment a lot, what's the point? And I said, well, if people don't know how to add and subtract, how are you going to present advanced calculus? And we just clicked. We saw eye to eye. He forgave me my faults as he saw them, and we covered some interesting things. And by the way, it gets so esoteric as to be two people in 1,000 even having any clue what's being talked about. It got that deep.
Yeah, like a good way to put it is you have to know how to, like how you just described that, you have to know how to add and subtract before doing calculus. Like, I loathe gematria, but you had a way of putting it where I can actually kind of see it now, where you admitted it. You were talking to Jason about it, and you were talking about the encodings of Munich and stuff like that. And you were like, yes, it's insane. It's insane. And I was like, yes, it's insane. So the way you put it helped me see it, because you were like, yes, this is all nonsense. It's not in nature. This is invented by man. This literally makes my head hurt, but they do it. And I'm like, oh, okay, now I can understand it. Whereas before, I always felt like people seeing gematria, they were almost saying that like these numbers are somehow connected to the natural world, and it literally hurt my head. I was like, it's not,
Here's the thing, man. I can't do math. I don't see numbers like most people do. I don't see them per se as values of things. I see them as symbols. And so what I did is I said, I'll do what I do with everything. I break it as simply as I can. So everything will become a 1 through 9. Nothing higher, nothing lower. A lot of people like to do big numbers. I can't do it without my wife here helping me count on my fingers. I'm not even kidding. My brain does not like math. But what you find is it's patterns. And then what you find is their symbols, so their intention can be placed on them. Like if I say 4, I have given you no intention that I want to talk about death. I'm just saying there's 4 things here. Yeah. If you see 4 in the news, there's a 90% chance they're encoding the death idea. If you see 2 4s, that's almost certainly death's doors. It's the same thing about 7s. My whole life, everything I have ever done has resolved. So even my birth name has 3 names, and each has 7 letters. That's how my wife got me to become Crrow777.
Nice.
And so what I'm saying here is people get hung up that 6 is a bad number. No, it's not. People get hung up that 33 is a bad number. No, it's not. It's the only way we can make a third of how we count.
Right.
It's the intention placed on them. And that's why I display my 7s proudly, because that's my intention is for the betterment of every living human being.
That's so true, because people can get wrapped up in it and almost get scared of certain numbers, where they see a number and they're spooked out by a number, and it's really just a number unless there's something behind it. But after learning about some of these things, when I see some of these nonsense death news events, the 33s and the 9/11 encodings are there every single time. It's actually kind of fascinating.
It is. The 33s are sometimes a bit like a thumbprint saying, yeah, we did that. And the reason is because it's plausibly deniable. Go ahead and show up in a court and say, look, judge, there's a 33. These jackasses did this. You get thrown the hell out. Right. It's plausibly deniable. It will always be plausibly deniable. But an adult human mind is not fooled. And that's what counts.
Yeah. And I think one thing that frustrated Dave J a lot, and probably someone like you as well, is it sounded like he had military training in the Navy and he worked with high explosives. And so, and just like when you were in the Marines and you would work with explosives. And so when you see something like the Boston bombing, you know, I've casually brought up that the Boston bombing was a hoax to people, and they go through the stages of grief and call me crazy and all that. But anybody that understands explosives knows that wasn't even a firecracker. It was literally a smoke bomb. And to see people trying to, I don't know, you describe it, about like the whole people running down the street with no leg, and it's like anybody that has training in medicine or anything medical, you would bleed out immediately, because that's the femoral artery, and it's just the amount of mistakes.
Less than a minute and a half, you'd bleed out, but that's not even the tell. You would be instantly in shock, if not unconscious, but that's not the half of it. When it happened, the day it happened, we had already quit watching things. We were on TV. I don't even remember what we were looking for. And as I clicked by, you know how they loop the explosion over, I saw it and I said, oh, another fake event. My wife said, how did you know so quickly? So I stopped and I went back and I started to break it down. And as we looked at it, there was this is what blows my mind. How is anyone that ever served in the military not all over this? And not only that, the damn police tweeted, I don't know, a few minutes beforehand that there was going to be a controlled explosion. And all these things get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm talking about. This is an event that should never have passed go. Never mind collecting the $200 damn dollars. It was that weak.
Yeah. No, it's so weak that, like, it's kind of like the moon landing sometimes, where I understand people getting frustrated because almost, I wouldn't call it fear, but a strange panic can set in when you feel like you're around people that aren't capable of perceiving the basic natural environment, where you're like, wait a minute, you drive a bus? Like, do you work for air traffic control? Like, how are you in this world? How do I rely on someone that literally thinks they drove a go-kart around the moon and made a phone call? I just, you know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, when you say it like that, it's like, how do people come to believe in? See, this is why belief is the enemy of knowing.
Yeah.
That's not a shot at religious concerns. And just to be perfectly clear, one of the most important things being removed in this age of scientism, it's spiritual concerns of a human being. You cannot reach your higher mind as an adult without a spiritual concern and without a recognition of this creation, which I call nature. You can't do it, not that I'm aware of. And that's such a big part of what's going on now is the sterilization, the homogenization, the complete bereft nature of the life of a human being and this artificial intent that surrounds us. But we can throw off these shackles. Any person that wants to be spiritual, whatever their tradition is, I'm about it. I will support that.
Yeah.
And I don't care who or where you are. That's how you reach to higher than E equals MC squared, my dying ass.
Yeah, the material Tubal Cain or Cain world versus it's like, because I see that sometimes, people sometimes will look at the world as far as just like team names, like you're wearing a jersey, like, are you red or blue? Are you Republican, Democrat? Are you Israeli, Palestinian? Are you Christian or heathen? And recently I was making fun of the Pope for having a boner hat, and I got all this heat from, and that they used a telescope named Lucifer. My buddy Mountain Bear did this whole cartoon of the Vatican coming up with that name, where they're like, well, it's large. We need to have that L there, right, guys? Like, of course. And then the U, and they're like, Lucifer. I feel like people might get the wrong idea. Isn't this supposed to be our enemy? And so to see people be like, oh, you want Christian if you make fun of the boner hat, and I'm like, no, I'm Christian. I think it looks like can you explain what the boner hat is or why it's not funny, And so we're talking before a little bit, and you were saying something about the boner hat having to do with a fish.
Yeah. Let me preface what I'm about to say. I am big on not downing anyone's spiritual beliefs, because I think it's one of the things that's been attacked down to the ground. All right. So first of all, I'm in the state of Rhode Island. I think it may be the most Catholic state. There's all kinds of real stone churches from back in the day here. Very Catholic. Hold on here. Let me comment once. Okay. I don't know. Rose is getting blocked out of your chat for some reason. But anyhow, let me use a scripture to say what I'm about to say. You can always judge a tree by its fruit. You just can. And that's something I learned from scripture. And I saw someone commenting that I studied a lot of different spiritual traditions, and I have. And I've learned something everywhere I've went, and I've never forgot the valuable things that I've learned from any human being anywhere in this creation trying to be more than they currently are. Yeah. But getting back to the Pope, if we look at the fruit from that tree, I think we don't even have to argue about what's going on. But the hat is symbolizing the fish. Everybody knows that there's a big sundial in St. Peter's Square tracking the equinoxes and the solstices there. There's a reason for these things. All the statuary is encoding basically the sun. It's a human idea playing the role of the sun in one of the given acceptable months of the year of the Lord. That's what's going on there. But you see, it's not just the fish hat. The word nun came to be around then. That also translates to fish. And this is about the age of Pisces, which we currently are in. These things were never lost on the power players. And what they did is they used it to their benefit or misused it to their benefit. And then they tried to teach all the rest of us that if you look up at the sky, you're going to hell.
Yeah.
And I got news for you. If this is a creation and that's what you accept, so is the sun and the moon and everything you can see. So if you don't value those things in the same way, you've been led astray. But that's what I can tell you about the Pope's sweet little hat there. My thing is talk to as many people as you can. It's like the old, Jesus was no good. He talked to the tax collector today. Look at all these, the harlots and the tax. Well, those were Jesus' response. Those are the people who needed to talk to me most.
Exactly.
I believe that. That's what I do. But the Catholic Church claims to have the spiritual concerns of everyone as the highest priority and the poor people. But you see, that doesn't wash with me, because they could melt down one golden statue that they have because they're one of the most valuable banks in the world. Right. And they could feed every human being in the world. So these are the fruits of the tree that we can witness. And this is not a shot at Catholics. And by the way,
or
anyone who's any religion doesn't need an organization.
Yeah.
They can find it, read the Bible, look within to find the kingdom of God.
All right, a lot of people wanted to talk about the band telescope, because this kind of blew people's mind, that that you look in full spectrum. I don't know anything about telescopes, and I already know that there's something called a double stack hydrogen. You know, dude, I listen to your show a lot, man, and I highly recommend. I put up an image here. Subscribe to Crrow777 Radio. Make sure the radio's on there because Crrow777 is some Yahoo
jackass.
Yeah, so Crrow777 Radio, and subscribe because he does 1 hour on YouTube, and then the second hour there's a lot of gravy. So the second hour of the Nuke one and the Dinosaur one, and a lot of them I found to be extremely helpful because you'll go into places that won't be flagged by AI. But yeah, can you tell the people about how there's things in the sky that we're not supposed to see, and they literally made a certain type of spectrum illegal that you were saying you're trying to get one of these old telescopes from Russia from the 70s because apparently the Soviet Union had more freedom to look in the sky than we currently do in 2019.
Well, people should I don't know, people aren't as old as me. Can you remember back when night vision first became a thing? It was almost all old Soviet tech that we got in the United States of America. It made no sense, but it wasn't a telescope, Owen. It was a camera system, night vision. And back in the day, sometime in the 70s, I haven't looked at these things in a while, so I'll get in the ballpark. I might not get it perfect. At some point, they made getting into UV, which is ultraviolet, and IR, which is infrared. Those are the two spectrums on either side of visual. You could get way into those spectrums, which means you could see more. Well, they made it illegal because of military applications. So when I got my Canon DSLR converted to full spectrum, it was just going into near NIR and near UV. And I said for a long time, if I could get further in these spectrums, I could almost certainly show more things. Because here's the thing, man. If you look at the spectrum of light, our eyes see this infinitesimal little band called visual. And so that camera gives you a little bit on either side. But if you could get further into these spectrums, there'd be no place to hide because it's described as one of them picks up heat and the other one picks up energy. That's one of the ways it was described to me by the optics guys who were converting my camera. There's all that. So I always thought, I'll bet you there's people out there with some of that old Soviet tech kicking around somewhere. And I wonder what we could see with it.
Yeah, because you've seen some stuff that is, it's really changed the whole dialogue in the world. And I'm not over exaggerating when I say that. Like the lunar wave really shook the foundation. I honestly think that one of the reasons chemtrailing has increased is because of people being able to see stuff in the sky and how many people are now aware that there's things in the sky that we weren't taught. So can you tell the people what went down when you first filmed the lunar wave?
Here's what happened. I had my nephew and my brother-in-law over, and I hadn't had my telescope out in a little while. And we took my telescope. I had no way to film. We were looking at a supermoon. I believe it was May something of 2012. And all of a sudden, my nephew hollers out, Uncle, there's a black triangle going across the moon. And I thought to myself, that lucky dog, I'll never see that. But sure enough, each one of us got to the eyepiece, my sister-in-law, all of us, for 2-3 hours, which from our point of view, the moon is moving. So for these things to keep transiting the moon between the end of my scope and apparently moving moon from our point of view, we saw it. And by the way, with an eyepiece, you do not see anything better through a telescope than with an eyepiece. The camera does a decent job, but it's not the same. You get ultra sharp views. I had a 26 millimeter eyepiece in. And so this went on for hours. Next day I go to get things to film. And I thought, well, I'll film for a year. I'll never get anything like this. Well, only a few days went by and I got some of these black objects. No one remembers what the first is. But then lo and behold, I accidentally filmed the lunar wave in September. And actually, it was not the announced equinox night, but they lie about what an equinox means, equal day and night. So it was a true equinox day, and it was the highest Jewish holiday as well. So I filmed that, and then I didn't know what it was. I almost deleted the clip, by the way. All this time went by, it kept bothering. Finally, I deleted off my computer into the recycle bin. And that night when I laid my head down, I swear, like a bolt of lightning hit me in the head, and I realized all at once, oh my God, this is a filmed event. I could prove it. Kind of scared me at first because I couldn't put a frame of context around it. So I jumped up, turned on my computer, put the clip back, and there it was. This is divine providence, if there ever was such a thing, and here's why. When I film, I keep centered on the moon because I don't want to miss something that happens in a second. When my wife films, she likes to look all over the place. She used to drive me crazy. And I'd say, honey, you're going to miss it, but whatever. Okay, that's her way. I'll just let her do it her way. And by the way, she caught a lot of interesting things doing that. But so I would stay there. For some reason, right before the lunar wave happened, I'm looking at this little 3-inch LCD window on the back of a Canon T2i with 16 megapixels. I pan down below the moon. The wave starts, didn't notice it, pan up to the moon, the wave catches up to the camera, which was the proof that took me a while to realize. And I saw it and I thought, oh my God, something's not going right. So I waited, filmed it, and I actually reached over to delete the clip. And had I done that, it had been gone off the camera. That's the only time I've ever done any of those things and not deleted the clip. So has to be divine providence there somewhere. But
yeah, no, it's beautiful.
I held on to it for a year, and then in 2013 I posted it, and the guy I was went away.
Yeah, man. It's like I was just listening to your newest episode with the Moon Man out of England, who I got to hang with in Dallas. He's an awesome dude.
He is.
And it was so true how he was talking about how after studying the moon every night, he knows less about it now. How sometimes it looks like a rock, sometimes it looks like a plasma, sometimes it looks see-through, sometimes it looks opaque. It's truly just like a mystery wrapped in an enigma. And what I know I don't want to put you on the spot because I know you don't like to say things that you can't prove, but what do you think the moon is?
I was thinking about this the other day. From my point of view, there's only one force in this world. It's called electricity, and it's associated with the sun, which is also generally thought of as masculine. So the moon is electromagnetic, so it could be thought of as the daughter of electricity. So I'll ask you a question. Do you understand women, Owen, or are they mysterious to you?
They're very mysterious to me, but I have one. I have one that I have one that
there it is.
I have one that circles me every 28 days that I live with, so we're good. I used to do stand up about that. That's the beauty of art. Sometimes is you stumble upon a truth that you don't even realize. I was doing this whole thing on La Luna. And say, like how I was trying to impress one of my Mexican friends in LA that I was learning Spanish. And I was like, El Luna. And they're like, no, La Luna. And I'm like, why? And they're like, because the moon is a woman. And I'm like, and then it started making sense to me. And I'm like, just like a woman, wolves and construction workers howl at it. It has a 28-day cycle. It gets nice and big and bright and then goes dark for a while. NASA spent trillions of dollars to plant a flag in it. And then you find out that they never even went. I was doing this whole bit about it. And then I'm like, wow, it really is a woman. Like it is La Luna. And you've done whole episodes about the limitations of the English language, about how the fact we don't apply gender to our nouns is almost like a slave language.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's truly a shame. When I've had guests on that speak Italian and older forms of Italian, like Neapolitan and other things, and when we've had translation problems, we go to them because we know. And by the time they get done, we're idiots. It always reminds me of Bruce Willis in Pulp Fiction. Booch, what's your name mean, Booch? He goes, honey, I'm an American. Our names don't mean squat. And there it is right there.
Yeah.
There it is right there. Even to the point where, you speak a little Spanish. I grew up in San Diego. I do too. So there's an idea behind even the gender. Like when you say la mesa, a table, it's not just a female connotation, but it also implies that that's her space, that she owns that, and you don't infringe on that.
Exactly.
But more than that, when the table's not set, it's El Mesa. When the table becomes set, it becomes La Mesa. So there's all this subtlety going on, and don't get me started on, like when we did we wanted to do it for a long time. I wanted to do the cathedrals, and I said these are maps in glass and stone to show a human being how to reach a higher human path, and they're destroying them. 2 weeks later, they took out the very cathedral that we were covering. But in that, we found old book quotes, and we had them translated by Dr. Lena, by other people that you've seen on the podcast. And we realized that what was being said about these things was written to people of stature, royalty maybe even.
Yeah, exactly.
But what was written was so generally written that it applied to everybody, but only the inside know it people would realize that real is not just what you think it means. It also implies royal.
Yeah.
And that led me into the double sun. And that is a thing. Well, here's the thing about the double sun. I held on to that from 2016 because I didn't want to undermine all my work, and I didn't have as much solar time as I did lunar time. And my H hydrogen alpha lunar or solar scope, I was worried I would say something stupid and it would defame the work I had done. So
see, I don't have that. All right, so yeah, let's talk about the second sun. A lot of people want to know about that.
So here's the thing, you know, this is really quite an involved story. I'll shave it down. This all started when I had my full spectrum camera on my 11-inch telescope, and I kept going away from the moon and finding a bright spot in the sky with only visible in full spectrum. And I kept thinking, what is that, a reflection off the firmament? What could this be? And I kept finding it night every time I went to look, and it was like a third of the sky away from the moon. So one day I was firing up to do the sun. I said, you know, if I could see it at night, maybe I could find something. And lo and behold, within like 30 seconds, I'm looking at what I think is a reflection of the sun. This goes on, and I tested a bunch of times, and I want to make the clip. I want to make that clip, but I'm just afraid because I'm thinking I can't, you know, I'm twisting the lenses. I'm putting big, long tubes over to try to reduce lens flow. Anyhow, someone watches that clip, and then he's in Denver. He replicates exactly what I did. So then I go public with it. And this is all around the time of the cathedral thing that we did when they burned up the cathedral. We preceded the burning by 2 weeks to show they were destroying that pathway for a human being. But so after this all goes down and we're getting translations of Italian and Latin and all these other things, I talked to Dr. Lena, who, if people follow me, know who Dr. Lena is. Brilliant, kind of real doctor that cares about human beings, wants them to be healed, not just taking drugs. But he was taught all over the world, and I said, Franco, man, I think I filmed two suns. And he goes, oh, I've known there's two suns for lots of times. I learned it when I was trained in the Vedic medical ways, the third two suns. And I'm all, what? He's all, yeah, there's a source sun. And he's just like matter of fact telling me what I was so nervous to say.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, all right, one of these days I'm getting rid of these diapers. I don't know what day that's going to be. But
that's hilarious, man.
Chris Van Maitre, thank you, Rose. She always keeps me on. It was Chris Van Maitre 155 that replicated my sun, double sun. So if I had to guess now, I think it's possible that there's a source. Like if you ever see all the old Masonic woodcuts and these other things, they always show holes in the cloud with light coming through, hitting the sun, lensing down to the ground. So after talking to Dr. Lena and some other people who apparently knew this since they were 5 for some reason, it might be a source for the sun we see in some way. I don't know. Hard to know.
Yeah, I mean, with the amount of programming we've had, like, even though I now realize the heliocentric model is as you say, poppycock, it's still in my head. Like, it's weird. Those mind hooks are still there. Like, I still picture the sun being a giant ball of fire, when in reality, it's definitely not that. But it's interesting how that programming can just stay in your mind. Like, when I think of the sun, I always think of a giant sphere of fire, when in reality it's definitely something electromagnetic and completely different, you know?
I don't think that if there was no matter for the effects of the sun to heat, I don't think you'd have, like, if it truly was a vacuum in space, which it's not, the sun, you wouldn't even be able to see it, I don't think. And by the way, when I was doing sun gazing, I remember just by chance, we didn't even know what was going to happen. We caught a Mercury transit with our naked eyes going across the face of the sun. But you know what it looks like after you get up to a few minutes and you can stare safely. And by the way, people, don't go stare at the sun. It's like giving a baby a jalapeno. Just don't do it.
Yeah.
If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to do damage. But anyhow, I'm looking for minutes and minutes, and it looks like a tunnel. It looks like you could go right into it, kind of, when you get to a point. You should talk to Dave Weiss. He got up to 45 minutes, and he said many of the things I said. I thought it corrected my eyesight, and he said the same thing years later because he heard what I did. You know, the biggest thing about the work I did is this. maybe not necessarily that what I did was so important or so astounding. It's just that so many people had never seen high definition video of the sky in that way. And now so many other people are doing it. That's really what's important. Think of all the people that now film because they were influenced. They didn't realize they could do something like that. And like Take Back Space, that dude caught the lunar wave more than once in front of Jupiter and its moons. He caught it he's the only guy that I know of, caught it in front of Saturn. This is where, as you would say, the gravy is. This is all human beings coming together to make a thing, known. Once a thing is known, it can't be lied about so easily.
Oh yeah, right now that's what they're doing with censorship. They're chasing the horses down the street, screaming, "Close the barn door."
Good luck with that. You showed what happened. Look, you are a perfect example of how we do still have higher minds here, because you got censored and you were pulling in an audience. You showed up where you did and you grew instantly. You know why? Partially because people don't want you to be removed, which makes censorship wrong. Secondarily, they're pissed off that the censors think they can do it, so more came. And tertiarily, there's a word for you.
I love that word.
They freaking suck and everybody knows it, so even more came.
Yeah, they're trying to. I love the way you describe society. Like they're trying to almost homogenize and pasteurize society, make that which is living dead. And
right.
it's one of the reasons I've gotten so interested in the sun and the moon and the stars and what you were talking about blood moon and harvest moon and stuff like that is because I've started homesteading, and I had a laugh recently thinking about one of my great aunts. There's like 10 women and 5 boys on this one side of the family, and they were farmers. They always homestead. They grew everything, but they were all Catholic. And I remember they were doing something with herbs to like heal something, and they were sarcastically like, "Oh yeah, we're witches," because they were. That's why I stay away from sarcasm, because I think AI would pick that up as real. But I remember thinking that like you can be. Like what people call witchcraft can be 2 very different things. You're either like a Hillary Clinton actual like baby eating like psychopath, or you just pay attention to the natural world, which happens when you know where your food comes from. Like when you talk about milk, or when you talk about when you should harvest this or not harvest that based on the sky, that's now my life. And it's so when people are like, "Oh, that's pagan," I'm just like, pagan just meant farmer. That doesn't mean like what Hillary Clinton and the elites do in the basements.
No, but that one thing you're pointing out shows the value in what it means to understand pagan. Right. Why would someone take the time to defame human beings? You see, right. Those human beings have 2 legs just like you do and I do. So we have a reason to care about them, and yet they were defamed. But I'm going to do this for you, Owen, right now. From now on, I'm going to refer to you as Ursa Major.
Yeah.
In hopes that you will get a telescope and start looking up. And by the way, the whole idea of alchemy is that there's a natural science that does not exceed what nature will allow. And there's another thing they defamed. "Oh, you're the devil if you do alchemy." No, nonsense. You can take that and stick it in your pipe, Pope. The Pope smokes dope. He likes to smoke his grass at the evening mass. That's where all that comes from. So to get back to alchemy, there's this idea that nature is perfect from our point of view. At least that's my idea, and it is. No human being can do better than that. They can't. It just can't be done. Not only that, it makes life. So if you take these ideas and then you look at alchemy, what you understand is a human being has the divine spark, and here's where it's demonstrated. You can take these 4 so-called elements of nature, earth, wind, fire, everyone's heard of them. It's not elements like we think of them. It's philosophical principles that allow you to use a human mind to do something with ideas. That's what it is.
So you don't believe in Einsteintanium? How dare you?
No, or Californium or Berkeleyum or all this other nonsense. Those aren't elements, by the way.
I know.
An element cannot be chemically divided. But to get back to the point, when you're using alchemy, there's this idea that a human being does the process, which is typically the breaking apart, the purification, and then the alchemical wedding or the recombination. To put that in perspective, pharmaceuticals just do the breaking apart when they make their bad chemicals. So During this process, a human being can bring to the table this thing called exaltation. So what you've done is taken nature, broken apart, purified it. You're going to put it back together. But what you've done is you've put your divine spark given you, and you've elevated it to this insane level. And a lot of that is tied to, did you do it at the right time? Was the moon phase correct? Did you harvest your plants at peak? This is what it's all about. This is why the sky clock is provably important. And don't get me started on the Great Barrier Reef and horseshoe crabs, because I always drop those two for people who don't understand.
Dude, that's fascinating, man. And it's like, and you said that, and also something that you brought up is the royals still will have their birthdays in Gregorian and Julian, almost just to poke us in the eye. Like, and same with Jewish people have a different calendar as well. And it's almost like when you think about our language of English and our calendar and our fake equinoxes that you've proven aren't revealed at the right times, and the chemtrails to make us so we can't see sunrises and sunsets. It's almost like they want us in a constant state of childhood where we're not allowed to grow up. It's like this, because when you look at pop culture, like Cardi B and rap and all this stuff, it's all to make an adult.
Babies.
Yeah, it's to keep you in that state of baby. And that's, and the trolls that come for me, the how dare you and the anger always comes when I'm just trying to act like an adult and just be like, because like this conversation about medicine and healing and stuff, I love my family so much that I don't care about shame. I like, if I'm like, when you were talking about the Gerson method for cancer, like, thank God none of us have cancer, but if we did, I want to know as much as I can about how to actually cure it and not go down paths that I know are run by this bizarre poison mafia. And so when people try and attack me for that, and they're like, oh, how dare you question the moon landing? I'm just like, do you not love anyone in your life? Like, if I lie or if I go with something that is false because of social shame, people I love could die. And I just think a lot of people, I think that's like
that's ego. That's ego. Everything you're saying is ego, Owen. So you have a better grasp on your ego. That's how this whole system runs. It'll shame you. 10 people will stand up to shout you down. If that works, your ego is getting the better of you. And by the way, if you go back and look at the 70s commercial, Let Go of My Ego, you're being poked in the eye.
Yeah, ego. Oh, man, I didn't even think about that. That's one thing that happens when you start dropping the veils from your eyes, is you'll like go back and watch, like the Goonies, for example, is so gross. It's like, or E.T., about this, the undertones of like pedophilia are just insane, and pushing the alien agenda and all this stuff. It's like, that's one thing that's helped me through these times, is knowing that there's always been these dark forces, but I think people were more asleep when I was a kid, than they are now. I think people are waking up to a lot of this stuff, and
yes,
there's a lot of growing pains, but it's there. There's people that, and because like when I tour, they can do all this shame tactics, and no one will show up. You're a former comedian, you're failed, everyone hates you, and they'll ban me from clubs and stuff because they're all owned by the same people. And so then I sell out an airplane hangar. And so the moment that they want to keep from me and from everyone else is when you look around the crowd and you see parents and teachers and engineers and, farmers, and just the people that they want you to think are all brain dead are not. I think that's one thing about social media, is it's making people believe that everyone is retarded now. And they're not. They just don't have an outlet. They're being shadow banned, they're being homogenized, pasteurized. And so a lot of people under this weight of, there's hundreds of millions of people that all just want to watch Cardi B and, stuff their face with cancer. And that's not true. And I'm proof that it isn't true. And when I tour, I could fill up a wood shop. I could fill up a warehouse with good people. And all of these, all these like labels that have been used to try and destroy my name aren't true at all. I've had people, I had a black gentleman come up to me and tell me that I'm the one who broke the spell of the N-word to him, and that white people don't actually just hate him simply because I made a mockery of it all. but you won't read about that in the media because they don't want us to wake up and look up. And it's kind of like what you're saying. One of the reasons that the globe earth is pushed so much and all these lies are pushed so much is when you get in your higher mind and you feel the ground not moving and you just look up and you see what is really up there, the first thing you think is we were created. And they don't want you feeling that.
No, they want you to think that two balls in space hit and gravity pulled it all. Yeah, you know the deal. But you see, the thing about getting into your adult higher mind is the first thing you have to do is stop believing in things. That's what you got to do. Right now, 1 and 1 is no longer 2 until I get out my little fingers and prove to myself, oh, yes, it is 2. Okay. For the rest of my life, I know that. Everything. And it's not easy. It is so easy to say, I just want to go back to when everything seemed right. But if you do it over, I don't know, a year, a chemical change happens in your head.
Yeah.
It's very hard to fool me anymore. I mean, I'm not unfoolable, but there's this instinct that you get, which instantaneously tells you something's not right here. Something burning in the kitchen. Don't know what it is, but something's on fire here. And everybody can get that. And here's the other thing, and I learned this from Eastern spiritual traditions. When you see somebody doing things you really don't like in an Eastern idea, those people are suffering. And if you analyze it, you can know it's true. Someone trying to be bigger than they are, someone trying to defend their ego with anger. So, it's suffering. It's what it is, what we do here. We suffer. And so if you come to understand this and know that life is not just hard for me, it's hard for everybody in that chat room. It's hard for you, then you start to get your humanity back because you don't want people to suffer if you're a normal human being. There are probably human beings around that don't give a damn, but most of us are not like that. Most of us would stop if a dog was hit and try to help the dog. And there is your humanity, where you actually care about this creation. And so a big part of how this place is controlled is same thing went on in World War II. Oh, those damn Japs. Well, no, they're not Japs. They're human beings. So don't try to fool me. The Krauts, the niggers, whatever it is. No, they're human beings. There was never an idea that Middle Eastern people were terrorists until roughly the Munich Olympics. In that ballpark, in that bailiwick, is when they started to firmly put the idea in that this part of the world creates terrorism. It's all manufactured. You know what the truth is? Hey, human beings live there, just like where you live.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I was just checking the chat. Everybody's loving this talk, except there's a couple people that said, alchemy is blasphemy or all witchcraft is bad. All right, my question for you guys is, do you think boiling water is bad? Like, do you think applying herbs to, these are the same people that will take Tylenol and alcohol. And it's like, what?
Both alchemical processes, right?
It's just unreal. Like, I'm currently drinking caffeine in my coffee. Do you consider that evil? Is that from the devil? I call these people churchians or Bible lawyers, where it's the Talmudic reasoning applied to Christianity. It drives me insane.
Let's help them out, Owen. Let's try to take a minute and offer a point of view, and they can take it if they want. Try to help. So, do you agree that this place is a creation and that it's special and we should take care of it and that nature is part of this creation? If you said yes to those things, then you should understand that alchemy is an older version of science that never hurts nature, never goes beyond what nature will allow. And to put a fine point on it, chemistry replaced it, and chemistry harms this place all the time.
Yeah.
So there's the truth. If you want to, you can think about it.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about what you're talking about how this is a closed system with a hard, fast barrier, is you don't get fooled by this like global warming nonsense or any of this stuff, because this place can heal itself. You can't, like that Club of Rome, Council on Foreign Relations nonsense. They've created this virus to make human being like a mind weapon to make human beings think that we're a virus on the planet and abort your babies and hate yourself and eat the Twinkies. And it's just not true. This place can't be damaged.
Destroyed.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. And it's like they've tried and they can't. It can rebuild itself. And that helps people not fall for these nonsense. Like a lot of these David Attenborough Animal Planet shows are designed to make people hate African farmers and agree with eugenics and genocide that they do over there. It's insane. It's like, oh, the elephant is dying because of these poachers and farmers. Oh, we got to save. And so then they move in and they wipe out a village and everybody cheers. It's insane.
That's what the whole World Wildlife Fund has been about. It's eugenics under a different name. And it's not the only thing. And by the way, the latest thing in all the nature shows is to reintroduce fear porn. They're saying that an ecosystem cannot be healthy unless fear is introduced. But it's all nonsense. And alchemy proves that too. In the same way that alchemy proved thousands of years ago that if I take water and boil it, it becomes air. At some point, it recondenses, falls back down. What it shows you when you understand a wider range than just something so simple as boiling water is that nature regenerates itself. This idea that somehow an oil spill has killed the environment, well, oil came from nature. Yeah, it's inconvenient. If you're stuck in an oil slick, it sucks. Point is, nature will put that right back in 25 or 50 years. That's this chemtrail nonsense. This is just designed to deal with us in one way or another and try to control weather. Truth is, they knock it off 100 years from now. It'll be, and here's the proof. How many people went through school hearing how bad slash and burn was as a farming technique? You're being taught that the entire rainforest is being slashed and burned. Well, there's a place in Japan where they've used slash and burn for hundreds and hundreds of years. Here's how it works. They live in a forest and they've got to eat, so they've got to be able to plant. Once in the lifetime of one farmer, they will slash and burn it, and by the time that lifetime is coming to an end, the forest he burnt is back, and the next farmer does the same thing. This has been going on and on and on for generations immemorial. So the truth is every time you hear about wildlife management, you're being told poppycock. Nature needs no management from a man or a woman. What needs management is other men and women if they want to be bossy. But nature, this idea that if we don't go out and kill some deer, all the deer are going to die because there's too many deer. I got news for you. This creation is too perfect for that nonsense to hold water. There's a hole in your bucket, man.
I know. That's the funniest thing is it's like this ego of man being able to control and rework the earth is, I consider that blasphemy.
It's a scam, man.
It's such a scam, and it's a way to control, and it's a way to create self-hatred. And it's like, man, you've done some, like when I was a kid, we had duck and cover drills because I lived next to 3 nuclear power plants. And your work on how nukes are fake was just, it really helped me a lot. Because, at first, when I was first facing the shape of the earth situation, it was painful, and I didn't want to be seen as crazy, and I knew what was coming, but I had to keep going. But when you showed factually that the nukes is it minimal, not explained to us the way it really is, I don't think people understand that it lowers anxiety and depression. It's not like guys like us that are ladling the gravy out there. We're not trying to scare people. This isn't scary to say that dinosaurs didn't exist and they weren't wiped out by an asteroid that can hit you anytime, and that their bones make the oil, so it's going to run out at any moment. That's why you have to give the Rockefellers your firstborn son. It's like, that's lies. So if you want to talk about the reality of nukes, I think that'll help a lot of people.
Look, it's pretty simple, and this will go back to alchemy. So I hope that some of the people who thought dimly of it will consider what's been said here, because I'm not lying to you. I'm here to care about human beings. I'm not here to lie. So here's the thing. I am pretty convinced at this point that those elements that they call radioactive are critically important in alchemical procedures because they do have energy in them. What's going on at a nuclear power plant is they're boiling water. It's what they're doing.
Exactly.
They're just doing it in a really clean, expensive way. But what they've done is convinced you that this radiation will kill y'all. So they've taken all these elements that are critically important to higher alchemical procedures and probably to making free energy, by the way. I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe a big part of this is healing people, really healing people with natural elements. They put it all in a bunker, told you if you go near it, you'll die. And by the way, we'll put you in front of a firing squad if you're caught owning any of this. So it's the same story being woven that the Holocaust killed all our people. So you can't look at us out of the left side of your eye anymore.
Right.
It's a double reverse, but it's unfortunate because I truly suspect plutonium and uranium, that these are very special, rare elements that allow you to do some pretty incredible things.
Oh, yeah, I got a story for you. And this is one reason why they like to keep us so divided in our like jobs and in where we hang out and all this. Because one of my best friends and my neighbor is a truck driver. And so, you know, in LA, you're put in a little pen where you don't hang out with truck drivers because you're just in LA hanging out with other people, going on auditions, wondering if their pants are tight enough. But this was some information that you don't get unless you know people that have had jobs that you can't imagine. And he said that one day he was driving the truck and they do these stops where you have to pull over and get checked. And the Geiger counters went off. You know, I was like, you know, and it's, and they had him get out of the car or out of the truck and they tested it. And the Geiger counters for radiation were just off the charts. And so they checked it out and it was porcelain. You know, he was transporting a ton of porcelain, and then they just closed it up and they're like, oh, you're fine. And he was like, don't I have to get one of those like showers? And they're like, no, just get out of here. Basically,
so that's the other thing. We can save your life. Just get in the shower.
Oh, I know. And so basically what they're doing is they're trying to make sure no one has uranium. And because the Geiger counters and radiation, all that, none of it's real. It's just a way to test if there's a certain type of, you know, energy or particle being released by an element. And so if you have a truck full of porcelain, you'll you know, the radiation things will go off the charts, but it doesn't give you cancer. Like, it's all a lie, you know? And it's just like, when I was a kid, Chernobyl melted down and they're like, for 50,000 years, it will be a barren wasteland. It will be a statue, a monument to the hubris of man. And in reality, there's people that never left. And, you know, the bees and the wildlife are thriving. And so now to keep the lie afloat, they're like, it turns out that radiation is fantastic for bees. It's like, or it's all a hoax.
Yeah, well, I guess bees don't have cells, right? That was the linchpin. Anything with cells was in trouble. Trees and plants have it. It's all provably nonsense, but
yeah, and there's a couple people in the chat that I don't think they understand what alchemy is, where it's like, where they say, oh, chemistry is alchemy, but without the occult ritual sacrifice and stuff. Boiling water is alchemy. You know, there's a whole power structure of people to keep people from viewing anything that could help their lives, where it's like, oh, don't look at that. It's of the devil. So when Jesus turned water into wine, was he a Satanist? You know, when you make soup, like one thing that people should know about Crow is he's a trained chef. It's like cooking is alchemy. You know, Satanism or the hatred of humans or all of that has to do with lies. It has to do with, you know, hurting people. It has to do with lowering people, making people animals, trying to convince human beings that they're animals, a hatred of God, a hatred of creation. Like nothing that has to do with the healing qualities of herbs has anything to do with that. And in fact, it makes me think the people saying that I don't know. It's like, how dare you look at the sky? Only the Pope, only Mr. Bonahat can interpret the sky with his Lucifer telescope. I wasn't Christian for about 20 years, and those were the people why. Like that Pharisee mentality drove me away from it as fast as I could run. Because they're not about the truth. They're about keeping people from actually healing themselves and keeping people in a constant state of pain.
Here's an example, Owen. Everyone's familiar with the work we've done to show how they try to get ownership of your children through strongman identities, through not letting allow you to understand that the 9 months you're in the womb, that you're alive with the divine spark. Well, here's one of the ideas of witches, which became so prevalent, was aimed against midwives. because
Yeah, exactly.
the church wanted the control of the birthing, so they made the midwives into witches, pagan witches, and that shows you. So if you still think that those are negative things, well, then go think what you like. But what I'm telling you is provably true here.
To see the big picture as to why certain groups are are attacked, yeah, you know, you have to know a lot of stuff that they don't teach in school for obvious reasons. Like if you leave the hospital without your placenta and all the birthing materials, they consider it. I mean, it's so crazy that I try not even to think about it, but it's like the reason they didn't want home births is because of ownership of children. It's like, it's pretty disturbing.
It is whole. This is the death society. A couple things happened in our world, which are some of the most tragic things that could happen to a world. And one of those things was the creation of corporations, because what corporations do is they let groups of men and women circumvent supposed government and then not be responsible for what they did, because the corporation is given the rights of a human being. And we can tell just by the word corpse, it's a body. It has no life, but it's given the rights of someone with life. The first year that corporations were being tried to be brought to bear, they kept being told, no, you prove that there's a benefit to living men and women. And finally it became, well, we can use corporations to protect minorities. So they finally let it happen. The first year corporations came, only a couple of people that were minorities saw anything, and all the rest of it was corporation as we see it today. So we know what was coming. And in this current age, it's so sad to see so many people stuck in politics. It's a complete mind warp. Those people that you see on your TV have no power. They're just puppets playing roles. And the blue and red paradigm was put in place by central bankers to get you to fight. So just because another human being is liberal and you're not, then you're instantly enemies, and you're playing into the hands of the people who invented this nonsense. I can prove to you what your high school teacher told you. The electoral college seats a president, and that was a backdoor of power put in when the 13 original colonies in this country set up. And yet we all still fall for this nonsense, not understanding that it's corporations, always has been, or clubs like Club of Rome. That's who runs these things, the central banks, these types of things. And everybody wants to fight about whether we impeach Trump. And it's sad.
Yeah.
You're wasting brain cycles on a fight that was put in place for you to have.
I know, and it's like, especially the most recent executive order, I don't pay attention to any of it. I don't watch TV. We don't even have cable. I'm obviously not allowed. I'm not even allowed on Twitter or Facebook, so I don't have any of that coming to me. But this most recent executive order he did, where you're not allowed to criticize Israel or the media or pornography or anything that involves anything with Jewish people, I don't see how people don't see that that's like the opposite of what Trump claimed to be doing. And then how can he possibly attack the media and fake news and all? It's like, we all know who runs it, you know, and it's not Jews. It's not like the individuals like Dave Weiss or Tyler or all my friends that are Jews. It's these constructs of like, well, you're not allowed to make fun of these people, and you're not allowed to say this word, and you're not allowed to do this. And just the act of agreeing with that is compliance. And these people will take that as compliance, and they'll take that as a go to then increase the boiling even more. And it's like, go ahead.
That's the whole thing, though. You see, if you're on Trump's team, he's your guy. He's going to drain the swamp. He's your savior. You're so bought into being on his team that when stuff like that gets said, you don't have the mental faculty to say, wait a minute, why can't I say a thing? Or why can't I use my God-given brain to decide if that's correct? And by the way, since I'm on your team, I'm just going to hate everybody by proxy. I could be looking at a person who saved my life 25 years ago because he was an EMT, but all I know of him now is he's a Democrat, so I'll just hate on him. And this shows the childish nature of what's going on. We're all human beings. We're all here together suffering. We're all trying to do the best we can. And if we're so easily convinced to hate someone for politics or religion, then maybe we don't deserve better than what we're getting. And I spend every day, 7 days a week, 10 hours a day in front of this computer trying to revive common sense. It's what I do. So the whole thing, I didn't invent anything here. Nothing I have said really is original. It's just trying to introduce common sense back to a world that's bereft of common sense.
Yeah, because it's not going to be good for the. I completely agree with you, but it's like this legislation, these executive orders that you can't make fun of Jewish people or criticize their industries that include the media, the military-industrial complex, all this stuff. I don't see how that can end well for Jewish people. If I was Jewish, I would be begging people to not do that. It reminds me of,
Right.
you know, the kid whose dad is the coach and who's like sucks at sports, but the dad insists he plays quarterback. And no one, and if anyone wants the actual quarterback to play quarterback, they get kicked off the team. Like that kid is not in a safe position. Like that isn't a good place. You don't want to supersede the hierarchies created by nature and reality to fit. When you force these things out of paranoia, it only creates, it manifests what they're scared of, you know, and that's why I always tell people to focus on your family, you know, focus on truth, pray, eat, you know. So I tell people if they've watched pornography within 3 months, they have no right to criticize me on anything because they're still blind, you know, but all this stuff, it's like, because now people are angry at constructs that don't even exist. You know, like what is an executive order? You have to breathe life into these constructs to make them even a thing. You know, it goes God, man, government, corporation is how it should go. That's where the rights delineate from. But now it's the upside down where it's corporation, and then under that is government, under that is man, and under that is the creator that no one will admit exists.
Well, there's a few things going on with what you said, and this is the problem. So many people come to my channel and they say, Crow, you're a 33rd degree Mason because you won't say Jew every other word. Well, I'm never going to do that. If I see somebody doing something wrong, I point at them and say, I don't appreciate that. If I know their name, I'll say that. But here's the problem. It appears to me now, with all the research that we've done, is that true Jewish people are not even in the same genetic pool as people like Netanyahu, those blue-eyed dudes. They're from somewhere else. They're from Eastern Europe or something like that.
Yeah.
But you see, part of the problem when Trump stands up to tell you can't criticize, it's because too many people have discovered that 3 times before World War II, they pushed the 6 million of us are dying lie. It's in newspapers. You can look it up. 3 times before World War II, they did that. And that's where the problem is. But the truth of it is if you simply appreciate nature, get back to nature, because there's no lie. If you learn something in nature, you don't even have to question if it's true. There is no lie in nature. And by proxy, if you value other living things, particularly human beings, you begin to undermine the system. Because the system needs you to hate other human beings. As a matter of fact, it needs you to view some as not even human. Those people in the Middle East, they're not even really humans. They want 72 virgins and to kill 800 people every morning. Nonsense. They have children, you have children. They want their children to grow up and be happy. It's what you want too. And until people grow up enough to start getting back to that, we're going to have a tough row to hoe. And it's really that simple. Everything that creates problems for us now is divisive in its nature. And one of the main tools of divisiveness is fear. For a spell to be cast, the primary ingredient needed every single time, and I'm telling you something important here, is emotion. A high emotional state is the fertile ground that has to be accomplished to plant their spell seed. If they can get you into fear, into a crying in a movie theater, or any high emotional state, you have just created the garden where they can plant their spell. It's what you've done. You did that. You reacted to their nonsense. You didn't realize that you're grown up and you probably shouldn't be crying or being mad or whatever. But there's the truth. For a spell to be cast, they need high emotion.
So
and
true.
If people take that on board, a lot of spells won't get cast.
Yeah, and they really are casting spells. It's not even, that's exactly how to describe it. Spells are very, very real. You know, I fell for the 9/11 spell. I thought that Muslims and Islam were a cult of death and they hated our freedom, and at any time they just wanted to blow us up. I fell for that because of the trauma of 9/11. And then as time went on, I just from knowing some Muslims and seeing how that's just total nonsense. And to see some of the lies around 9/11, I felt like I really needed to make amends for that. You know,
let's point some things out, Owen, about the Muslim culture. First of all, every Muslim that I have ever met in my life have been same with people from Mexico. Some of the most polite, caring people that I've ever met. But here's the thing you may not know. One of the pillars of Islam was that you could not have usury. In other words, you couldn't use money to make money. You couldn't loan it in interest. That's
Right.
called usury. When I was young, usury was 3 or 4%. Now we have regularly 30% usury placed on us. Another thing about Islam is that their currency has to be backed by specie. In other words, it has to have value. In other words, gold or silver, not fiat currency.
Yeah.
Now you have a pretty good idea of why the Middle East is being ripped apart, because you can't put a central bank in with those tenets. Here's another thing. In the culture of Islam, if your enemy shows up at your door and asks for a roof over his head and hospitality, by tradition, you give it to them. Your enemy can come to your door and you will say, come on in. Everything else is forgotten. Our culture says people are people. Can I feed you?
Yeah.
So before you go hating on another culture somewhere in the world, it would behoove you to learn something about them, to meet some of them, and to honestly assess instead of just looking and saying they got a turban, they must be half gorilla or some low-minded nonsense.
Well, one major spell breaker for me is when I realized the powers that be don't care about me or my health at all. Like once I realized that they weren't, that we aren't really spreading our wonderful ways of freedom and that they want us happy and healthy, that these people would, they literally buy and sell us on the stock market based on our social security numbers. Once I realized that, my whole frame shifted and I saw like, so who is the enemy of banking? Who is the enemy of pharmaceuticals? Who is the enemy? And it's people that reject usury. It's people that reject a lot of these ways that allow evil to enter a culture and usurp it. And it's like it was just such a shift in my mind that I now have a little more humility with that stuff where I don't. I know evil, there's a material evil and it's not a demographic of people. People can be, can embody evil because they're weak. They don't have the armor, and those people, but they don't create the evil. They just are taken over by it because of their, traditions or, what do you think is going on with Antarctica?
I think probably that there is more land beyond Antarctica that would blow your mind, almost like an entire world and resources that we know nothing of, that only special people with a fake royal title can get to, since everything down there is named after a prince or a duke
Rothschild.
or, these types of things.
Yeah, there's Rothschild Island, right? And it was so funny. I saw on Google Maps, there's Rothschild Island, like right next to Antarctica, and people gave it 2 stars out of 5. People are like, yeah, we don't like Rothschild Island. And other people wanted to know about Tesla's 3, 6, and 9. Like, what do you think when he said that if you understand 3, 6, and 9, you understand free energy? What do you think that means?
He didn't say free energy, if I'm not mistaken. He said you understand everything. The original version of 369. But what I would point out is this is like spiritual traditions, what Tesla said there. In other words, I think what he's implying is I could sit here and try to teach you about it, but until you stand on your own 2 legs and understand what this means, then you're not getting where you need to be here. And this is a lot similar with spiritual traditions. And so when we hear that, we think, well, let's see, what did I learn about 3 in school? Well, 2 3s is 6. Well, 6 and 3 is 9. Well, and we start thinking in all these preconceived ways. Maybe if we use our own brain to look at these things in a new way, we'll learn something new. Because certainly, if Tesla was a real man, he was not interested in putting up a power company and bilking us. He was interested in giving people energy. And so I'm just saying that those kinds of riddles show you that it's your responsibility to use your brain.
Yeah, and how you're talking about base, how there's a possibility that if you have instead of base 10, if you have like base 15, base 60, it's kind of like language with gender. Like there could be whole worlds open up to you if your basic math assumptions shift? And is there a class of people or a knowledge base that has to do with base 15 or base 60 that we don't understand, you know?
Well, that's the thing. And do you guys remember back when computers were kind of relatively new? There was this real popular game named Myst. And it was like a fantasy world with all these puzzles you had to solve. I was playing that with my father. It was before my father had died. And I was in San Diego. He was here in Rhode Island. We were playing together. And he was a PhD, by the way, smartest man I ever knew. He couldn't figure out one thing. And I realized, what if it's not base 10? Turned out it was base 15. And the reason I had thought about it is because websites were new and I was building them and all the color is done in hexadecimal, which is what got me thinking about. But you see, to think about the world in hexadecimal is to think about the world in an entirely different way than base 10. So I think it's an important idea, but unfortunately, to me, numbers are symbols and they don't hold value in the same way they do for most people. For some reason, my mind doesn't work that way.
Yeah, like the zero. You know, the zero it becomes philosophical as well as mathematical. You know, it's like these inventions of constructs are really, really intense. A lot of people are talking about base 12. Right. Yeah, like people are talking about base 12, about how 12 you see repeated so much, and how, I just, there's a lot I don't understand that I just kind of let be because I don't know. You know, the irony of living the way I live and the way I'm guessing you live is you see a lot of stuff without even trying because you're more connected to what actually is than all these like fake constructs. Like for me now, it's so obvious that the dinosaurs were a fraud and people just can't, a lot of people can't get there. They're just like, but I mean, no, the movies and the pornos and it's just bizarre to me, you know?
It's a strange day, and the truth is there will be hard times because you'll feel like a dolphin in a world of whales sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And until you get to the point where you can find your way and not be so concerned with it, and then understand that you have a chance to maybe help people consider new things, then it becomes a whole other thing. Like maybe my life isn't a waste.
Right.
Because before I did certain things, I couldn't claim I was learning, but what was I doing? You know, nothing that's going to contribute to the world in any meaningful way. And so I found this whole other thing. And the one thing that all this allowed me to, it's like when you brought up the zero thing, I realized at some point that zero is non-existent. It's aberrational. In a world that is made of everything, it's impossible to have nothing, and this proves the space nonsense. Space is supposed to be this place just over your head, but it's nothing. Right. You're actually thinking about a place that isn't there as if it was, and that is zero. It's one paradox. Thing to use zero as a placeholder, that you can understand that, but to use it as the lack of everything is completely foreign to a human thought process.
Exactly.
There can't be a lack of anything because the only thing that makes this place is everything. And then when you get into negative numbers, it's not just that there's none, you know, the absence of a thing. There's the absence of the thing times one, times two, times, and you get into this bizarre theoretical world that is non-reality. And that's where we've come with science, theories. And theories are just ideas. And by the way, gravity is not just a theory, it is actually, truthfully, provably a theory based on a theory. In other words, if you're teaching that to your children as a fact, you are doing them a huge disservice. It's a damn idea based on another damn idea.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. I really saw through a lot of the lies based on their squirms, you know, because I know very little about certain things. Like I didn't understand particle theory of light, but I do understand the basic dynamics of a lyre. And when people were saying, oh, light's a wave, you have this frequency, you have that frequency, and then it's like, so how does it go through a vacuum? Because a vacuum cannot have a wave because you need a medium. And they're like, oh, it's also a particle. And I'm like, if a 3-year-old wouldn't be this bold-faced in their lies, you know, how it magically goes from a wave to a particle just to stay in their lie within a lie within a lie. It becomes like that movie Inception where it's like,
right.
It's like a lie within a lie within a lie. And all they're trying to do is not be noticed by your subconscious as they just shift something inside your mind to sell you something else for control. And it's just like, so a wave, because picture a wave on an ocean just becoming a rock, and
or
then
a beach ball.
Yeah, a beach ball, and then a wave again. And people just they don't question it, and they just regurgitate it. And they almost get a Stockholm syndrome with nothing. The
Right.
nothing from the Neverending Story. It's like they almost fall in love with it, where they're like, I can't let go of the nothing above my head. And it's like, on the globe Earth, there is no up. I think that's one of the big things to break divinity, is to say, to look up and give thanks. You can't.
There it is.
There is no up.
Every scripture broken. Every scripture to do with heaven or God broken by a globe Earth.
And that's why I don't see how people don't see that. I really don't. Where it's like everything about up, the God is above. That's not possible on a globe, because that's when I think Einstein was a bit of an actor. I think he was a character doing something, because his theory of relativity, it fits nonsense just so perfectly. I almost don't believe he was a real person in a lot of ways.
He's a construct. Einstein's a construct, and your whole idea there with the vacuum, well, we can blame that on Einstein, because Einstein showed up after two guys proved the Earth was stationary and that there was a thing called the fifth element, or the ether, or the quintessence, and that it's required for anything to propagate through. You see, when you're looking at that so-called vacuum, the ether is still there. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
But Einstein showed up and said there is no ether, no experiment, no fancy math.